to our study group. I don't know how many study groups this has been, but at least 5. So thank you for coming. My name is Whitney Akiola. I'm a content creator for IntegrationQuest. You may know me because I've been a part of the MuleSoft community since 2016 as a professional, as a curriculum developer, and now as a content creator. So today is all about Mule 4, and Ryan is going to, real error handling, sorry. And Ryan is going to give you a real life demonstration. So we're so excited to see what Ryan has prepared for us.
Workshop. What kind of errors? Some of you have been in the weeds already, right? In Mule code, right? What kind of errors do you deal with? Just give me a shout out one. You don't give me everything in your head. One.
Timeout.
Yeah, sometimes you have a service calling another service. Maybe it's a database. Maybe it's a REST API, and you have a timeout. Okay. Yeah. What else? Let me get the wrong. I think I have the wrong screen up here. What other sort of errors? There's a bunch of errors that you could run into.
Bad requests.
So your input is no good.
Service unavailable.
Service unavailable. So the something. So you got a dependency downstream. That's no good. So really, we've just identified there's 3 locations for a problem. Okay, and we've only identified 2 of them. Right. A problem could be with your client. Right. Your client gives you bad input. Your client has a bad password. Your client hangs up before you answer. You know, there's all these problems that might happen that have to do with something the client is doing. Right? We're an integration. We're in the middle. So whoever is calling us has a bunch of things that can go wrong, right? And then there's the other way around. Our software calls other software. We call that upstream. So we're going to turn around and call a database or a system API or a file system or whatever, Salesforce, and that can have problems. So we had timeout. Right. We talked about what else could be the problems with the downstream, the service unavailable. What else?
Connection failures.
Connection failure. Yeah. So I can't have a firewall or something that won't let me get to my downstream. Right. So one place problems can happen is in our client, right? Downstream. One place problems can happen is in our server, upstream. And I'm telling you, there's 3 places. Where's the last place a problem can happen?
The application itself.
Right here, yeah, in our code. Yeah, very good. So we want to decide what is our error handling is this whole concern of how do we make our integration. How do we control what our integration is supposed to do in all these situations, right? Because there's already, in all situations, something it's going to do by default, right? Error handling is a unique, like all errors get handled, just maybe not by our code, right? Maybe they just get handled by the Mule runtime, or you know what I mean? So we may not be happy with getting a 500 and a stack trace in the response body all the time, right? There may be other ways we want to behave for error handling. So what we're going to focus on is the way Mule 4 gives us a basic way to a basic set of fundamental tools for error handling. So first of all, who wants to let me see how I'm going to do this. I don't have a diagram. I've already used a text document. Who wants to tell me what is a Mule error? Give me at runtime. At runtime, the Mule error is what? When it's running, what is the error actually? Here, I'll give you more hints.
Are you looking?
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking error object is an object.
It's an object. What's an object? Very good. Let's generalize. An object is a Java word.
A data structure.
It's a data structure, yeah. So, and again, now for a data structure, what are some things we know about data structures? Data structures don't do things, right? They don't have behavior. Java objects do things. They do have behavior, right? Java objects have methods, and methods have code, and code can operate, right? Code can execute. Data structures don't have any code, right? What do they have? A data structure obviously has data. When you work with any data structure, what is a data structure made out of?
Primitive and non-primitive data types.
Yeah, so there are data types. Yeah, so there's data types, and there are primitive and non-primitive. Mule doesn't care about that distinction, so we're not going to worry about primitive and non-primitive for this, but you're absolutely right in C or Go or something. So in Mule, it's just a data type. And a data type has, so one of the things a data type has is what makes it a type instead of like a binary. Like the difference, a data type is different from just like a byte array because what? Like tell me one of the non-primitive data types you were thinking of. Besides Mule error, because we're going to do that one together.
Hash map.
Okay, and what is it? What is a hash map? What belongs to a hash map?
Keys and values.
Keys and values. So some data types have keys and values, and some don't, right? What is like an array doesn't have keys and values, right? A user doesn't have, well, it has certain keys and certain values, right? Yeah, a string doesn't have any keys and values. An int doesn't have any keys and values, right? So some data types have one schema, and other data types have different schemas. That's why we have types, right? So the Mule error is defined with fields. It is like a hash map, but it's more specific than a hash map, right? So what are the, oops, I can't take a meeting right now. What are the fields of a Mule error?
Error code, description.
It doesn't have an error code. It does have a description, right? But it's not exactly called error code. It has another name.
Error type. Or type.
Yeah, the type. Good. And this is these are all strings.
Right.
So it turns out these are all string fields, right? Not all data types are all strings. I will not answer that when I'm on the air. All right, and there's one more.
A description of the error or detailed description maybe.
We have that. We have the description of the error. There's actually a fourth field, you're right. But let's go stick with the type. The types have an extra piece of information, don't they? Like let's say you have an error that comes from the database connector or an error that comes from the HTTP connector. We call the extra field the namespace. Who wants to, like, what is an example of a namespace you've seen in your code?
HTTP,
Yeah.
HTTP, gem,
Yeah. Now, in Mule, namespaces are reserved. Does anybody know what reserved means? What happens if you try to make an HTTP error?
Is allocated to only.
You're going to get an error in AnyPoint Studio, and you're also going to get an error if you try to run the application, right? Because it's not allowed. So it's what's the right word? It's prohibited to raise an error from another component's, I don't know if you call them component, plugins namespace. What's a plugin? That's not really part of this study, but hey, maybe somebody knows what a plugin is. No? They're over here. These are plugins. Some of them they're actually modules. So in the pom.xml, these are represented as a dependency with a type called Mule plugin. Okay, so here we go. You can see the HTTP connector is a Mule plugin. So that has the opportunity to reserve an error namespace for itself because it is a Mule plugin, right? So if one of your plugins defines errors or Mule core itself, then you don't get to have those namespaces. That's not for you. So somebody was starting to call out, there's a little bit more information that can be accessed in an error besides namespace, type, and description. I'm going to put it in here. It's called error message. Anybody worked with the error message before? Related to when the error was raised. All right, why is that useful? Anybody? Anyone? Okay. You try this yourself in an experiment after the study group. Go make an HTTP request to something that's going to give you a 500 back, something that's going to fail, right? And if you want to get the response body like you get in Postman, you got to use this error message to go get it, right? So that's a good experiment, a good little homework assignment for you to get hands-on experience with this data structure. If you want any of the payload information that came back from the server with the error, you have to use this part. That's where it is. So, okay, good. Why don't I put that in here too?
But yeah, it doesn't, even if you use an error message, right? So we see a Mule error, right? Mule interprets the external system error and gives its own error, right?
For the description, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the most of the time the challenge I have is to capture the actual error message from external system.
Yeah, and that's going to be, you have to do work, but it's in here. This is a complex object.
Yeah, very complex. Yeah.
Yeah. So debugger helps here. Let me put that here. Yeah. Good. Good observation. Who was that? I want to give credit.
Really.
Trini, good one. Very good one. Okay. First step is Mule errors are that's the data structure. So let me put one more thing. It's a data structure in the Java heap at runtime, and it is part of the Mule event, which is also a data structure. What's different about Mule errors and Java exceptions is that they're not part of control flow. They are instead part of event routing. Fundamental difference between Mule and Java is Mule is an event routing system. As many study groups as you're going to come to, you're going to keep hearing me repeat that. Mule is an event processing language. So if we're going to make an example flow here and get this lesson going, you guys are going to build it we're going to build it together, but you're going to make a bunch of predictions about what this is going to do. This is just to give Diane credit, this is part of her class that she's about to prepare. So anyway, I'm going to do my version of it. It may not be exactly the same as the class, but my Anypoint Studio and Zoom are not getting along. There we go. All right. I'm going to keep this example. This is a very useful, I was working with Jesus last night. Hello, Jesus. He was already doing this on his own. When you want to understand something about Mule, you make self-contained examples of your own and run them and see what they do. Best way to learn what Mule does, right? Don't try to do it in the middle of your work application. Like, actually go make one. So we're going to do flow 1. This also helps with Mule support. If you find a problem that you want to deliver to Mule support, if you can make a simple little app that just has only what you're looking at and you still have the problem, then you send that to Mule support. And they don't have to work out all your, all the rest of your business stuff. I am sorry that my Anypoint Studio is not responsive today. There we go. So we're going to assume that we have a little flow There we go. I've been recording some footage for YouTube, and what's nice about that is when this happens, I can fast forward, and you don't have to wait for my Anypoint Studio. I can edit that out. All right, so we're gonna just give this a basic configuration. All right, guys, we're finally gonna have something for you to predict. Okay, we're gonna make two flows. Flow 1 and flow 2. Flow 2 is a private flow. Come on. There we go. And they're both going to have loggers. Logger 1. Now, flow 1 is only going to have one logger. All right, and it's really, we're going to be making predictions, so we don't have to make the application do much. This is a very simple example, right? We just want to see what happens. Logger 2. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to put logger 2 inside a scope that Mule offers called the try scope. Why? Because the next thing we're going to investigate is called error handlers. Now, we're going to ask you guys a little bit of quiz questions here as we go through. Error handlers, you can even see it in your palette. Error handlers are not the same thing as error scopes, right? On error continue, on error propagate, those are error scopes. Those belong inside error handlers. Error handlers are something that can contain error scopes. So I haven't put any on my screen, but there are already some here. Flows have error handlers. You can see them here at the bottom, right? So there's some error handlers. So we're going to add a try scope, which is a scope that itself has an error handler inside it. So we're going to put a try scope here, and we're going to put logger 2 inside the try scope. Okay, so now we see how many error handlers are on the screen. Put in the chat. How many error handlers are in my application? Very good. Srini says 3. You guys see the 3? Prove it to yourself. This is useful. This is a study group, right? So it's useful if you count them. Where are all the 3 error handlers? Find them for yourself. Okay. And what we're going to do is understand what Mule does when you do and when you do not define error handlers. I'm going to show you some XML here. What's number 4, Ajit? I think I know what you're talking about.
Yep, default error handler.
The default error handler. You can never get rid of that one. But that one, you can't program that one. The default error handler is what we're about to look at. Okay, the default error handler has a pre-programmed, hard-coded, unmodifiable behavior. Anybody want to know what that is?
An error propagate?
It propagates. That's one of the things it does. Yeah, good. And what's the other thing it always does?
It halts the program.
It stops. Yeah, so halt. I like that. Halt and propagate. And one more thing.
And prints the default error object. So it throws that trace. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I didn't say halt. I say every time I do a class, I always word it like this. It says stop, log, propagate. Default error handler always does that. And you can, it's easy in your head. You're like stop, log, propagate. Every time I hit the default error handler, that's what's going to happen. Now, it's actually not, that's an easy memorization trick. But the stopping is not really part of the default error handler. The stopping is actually the job of the flow. So let's see what stop means, okay? the error routing is different than the error handling. So I'm going to put in error in here. Oh, and I want to put one more logger, so after the try, so we can see the stopping happen. There we go, logger 3. Good. So we're going to add a raise error in the try here. And we're going to, now errors have, like we said, a type and a description, right? So we're going to use study group colon error A. So we've defined a namespace of study group, a type of error A, and a description, error A occurred or something. There we go. So now we've got, let me put that here too. There we go. So we can see it on the screen. So error A happens there. So if we ran this flow right now, what loggers would be reached? Oh, 1, right? Logger 1? Because I'm missing something. Some of you are figuring that out.
There's no
We don't
flow
have a flow
reference.
reference.
There's no flow reference.
Very good. Let's put it in.
But even with the flow reference, it's still logger 1, right?
Nope.
Really? Because
What is the and that's key. Yeah. The default error handler is used if you don't define one.
yeah, that's right. So it's not going to print a logger now.
0 loggers are reached. Very good. But 0 loggers are going to be reached, right? Now, what's going to be in your log file? How many errors are going to get printed to your log file?
3.
3, very good. Now let's follow it. So this is the error. You can break every Mule program down into event routing. Okay, so we have a Mule event getting produced by the listener, right? The listener, whenever you send a postman request in, is going to produce a Mule event. Okay, and I want you to dream about red and blue arrows when you're studying Mule. Okay, so the flow 1 has the Mule event at this point. I don't want you to think it goes straight to the flow reference. The little arrows that Anypoint Studio prints are a little misleading. There's actually 2 steps right at the beginning. The listener produces a Mule event, and that goes in RAM. And the flow 1 at runtime subscribes to that Mule event. It gets notified that there is a Mule event. So flow 1 is the one that has a reference to the Mule event in RAM, and flow 1 routes it to the flow reference. See? So that goes from the listener to flow 1. It goes to the flow reference, and now what happens? This is kind of fun. The flow reference becomes the event source of flow 2, because it's a private flow. So it gets a virtual or a dynamic event source, which is the flow reference, right? And now the flow reference produces a Mule event, and it's the same one that went in, right? So now flow 2 has the Mule event. Every step along the way, the event is getting transferred from step to step. Flow 2 routes the Mule event to the try. Now the try is a special kind of event processor that knows how to route its own events, right? So the try routes it to the error A raise error. And that produces a new Mule event. Every event processor produces a Mule event. Now this Mule event is different because it contains an error. Every step up to now, there was no error in the Mule event, right? But right now, when we come out of here, there's now an error. So the try scope decides not to send it to route logger 2. The try scope routes it instead to the error handler. Now we have a bit of a problem because there is no error handler there, right? So if there's no error handler there, where's it going to go?
Propagates to the.
It's going to go to the default error handler,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that does what?
Stop.
Log propagate.
Propagate.
Yeah, stop, log, propagate. Now, propagate means something. We're going to be I hope we're all going to leave this study group knowing what propagate means. So we're about to see what it means. It went to the default error handler, stop log propagate, and now
Rethrow the error.
Hey,
it's gonna
Ryan,
come. Yes.
can you take a screenshot of that when you're done?
That's not in the recording.
Oh, yeah, I guess I can go back and look at a recording.
I hope it's in there. I'm gonna keep drawing. So yeah, I'll screenshot. I'm fine. I'm happy to screenshot too. Okay, propagate means this: when the try has to. The try itself is an event processor. Okay, so I'm gonna highlight it. Whatever happens inside the try is gonna happen, and then when it's done, it has to produce a Mule event because all Mule event processors produce a Mule event when they're done. Part of the contract, right? So one Mule event in, one Mule event out. Okay. So at this point, after the default error handler runs, the try scope is ready to produce its Mule event, and it produces a Mule event. And because we propagated, it has error A. That's the reason that error A is there. So I'm going to screenshot that for you. There we go. Good. Okay. All right. Now, who has that Mule event now? We're still in the middle of the program, right? The Mule event just got produced by the try. It has an error on it. Now, who has it?
Flow 2.
Flow 2 has the Mule event. Very good. So it has to decide what to do with it. Well, flows will not route Mule events that have errors to go to the next step. This is where stop comes from. Flows have a policy that errors don't keep going to the next step. So even if it's a default error handler or if it's a regular error, no matter what the error handler is, you're always going to stop. This, I think Shauna said that too. Yeah, no matter what, Mule flows do not allow errors to proceed. Okay, so it's going to send it. Why do I have green? It's going to send it to its error handler, which it doesn't have one. So what's going to happen?
Default error handler, again, stop log propagate.
Stop log propagate. So we got two logs now. Now, flows, when they're done, they don't propagate. They're the top level object, right? So you don't produce. Let me draw this here. This is not what happens. Okay, this is not what happens ever in Mule because flows are not inside another component. Flows have event sources. So what really does happen, I'm going to try to draw it, is it routes the event from here. I'm going to do it at the end of the flow. It routes the event to the event source, which is what? Flow reference. And yes, very good. And because it's an error handler, it's a default error handler, it's stop log propagate. When it does that, it's going to have an error on it because we propagated. That's what propagating is. The error is kept and it's communicated on the way, right? So that means the flow reference is going to produce a Mule event that has, surprise, surprise, an error on it. Yeah. And flow 1 isn't going to go send that to logger 1 because there's an error there, right? Flow 1 is going to send it to the error handler, which is what? Look familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
So again, default error handler, stop propagate.
Stop log propagate.
Yeah.
3 times. Now this time, the flow doesn't have a flow reference as the event source, right? The flow has to route the event to its event source, which is what?
Listener.
And it propagated, right? So E. Let me get my colors right so Whitney's screenshot looks good. Boom. There it is. We just routed it to the event source, and the event source has to decide what to do with the error. So let me do one more screenshot. I'm about to erase all this stuff. Boom. There we go. All right. Clear. We have to go look at our HTTP listener. Each connector that defines event sources can have its own policy for what to do with errors. So the HTTP connector has a policy in the responses configuration. And you see there's a response definition, a configuration for what to do with responses, and a different configuration for what to do with error responses. So what's it going to do by default? You saw I didn't change this. So this is the default in Mule. It's going to print out only part of the error event, right?
Correct.
Which isn't always the part you want. Which is why you need to know about this. This is where you go change what it does if there's an error. Yeah. So that's the basic behavior of error routing with the default error handler. Now you didn't come to the study group just to know what the default is, right? Well, maybe you didn't know you did, but anyway, we want to sometimes have something to say about what these errors are going to do, instead of just letting the application do whatever MuleSoft thought of. So let's add a error handler. I'm going to put on error continue in here first, because we're going to change that propagate behavior. And we're actually going to do the opposite of the default error handler here. Okay. So on error continue is a scope. That means I can put more event processors inside, but I don't have to. I can leave it empty, right? So let's start with just that and see what that does. Okay. One thing I can do is turn off the logging. There's a little checkbox, right? And if we look in configuration XML, what I just did is here. So you can turn logging off on your error handler by providing an error scope that doesn't log. So that's different than the default error handler. And I used an on error continue, which doesn't propagate, right? So now let's draw it out. I'm not going to do the whole deal. We just did the whole deal. I'm going to start at the raise error. Okay. So let's start at the raise error and let's draw it out again. Okay. When it raises the error this time, it has, well, first of all, it has, wait a minute. I think I'm supposed to use red here. There we go. We're going to raise an event out of the raise error, and it contains an error, right? So it does not go on to logger 2 because the try scope refuses to do that. Instead, it sends it to the error handler. And part of what you should walk out of the study group is a clear, there's an error handler and there's an error scope. And the error handler has the power to route to various error scopes. Now, we only defined one error scope, okay? And it's on error continue. So the error handler will route it to the error scope, and it will match because we don't have any rules on the error scope. And now what's going to happen?
Handle the error there and move on to next flow, which is logger 3.
Well, it won't log because we turned it off.
Okay.
It will go back to the original, to the main flow.
I should say you were right. You were right what the outcome is. I just want to go step by step. That's all. So it will go on to logger 3 and the main flow. But the way it does that is the try scope is going to execute whatever is in the on error continue, which is nothing in this case, right? There's nothing in there. So nothing gets executed because we didn't give it any instructions. And then the on error continue exits, and now the try scope produces a Mule error, and a Mule event, and the Mule event doesn't have any error, right? Because the on error continue did not propagate. That's the difference. That's what propagation is in control of. So we didn't propagate, so we have no error. So it routes it as far as the flow is concerned. Everything's fine. Let's just go ahead and route it to logger 3, right? And on we go. So which loggers get reached when you put the on error continue there?
All?
Not logger 2.
Oh, sorry, logger 1 and logger 3.
Yeah, logger 1, logger 3, not logger 2.
Mhm.
Because the on-error continue in the try has no way to keep going inside the try. All it can control, what the propagation behavior defines, is only what happens after the try, not what happens inside the try. All right, good. So on we go. We did well. All right, let's do another one now. Let's add in error matching. So I'm gonna clear my drawings here. Let's make the on-error continue. There we go. Let's make the on-error continue only match study group error B. That's all I've done. Wait a minute. I don't want to change the doc name. That's confusing. We want to see that it's an on-error continue. So let's put that back. All right. So I've changed very little, right? I've changed one thing. So error scopes can have policies about what errors match and what errors don't match. So I just used one. Now what will happen?
Yes, I can try. All right. So
Yeah.
the try, when it enters try, the error is raised. So the error is error underscore A, and the error is it goes to the error handling. And since it's not matching, the error types are not matching, it goes to default error handler, right?
Aha. Yeah, let me draw all of, you said a lot, and I agree with what you said, but I want to visualize, right?
Okay.
So it's going to be routed by the try. And always, when you're thinking about event routing, always be sure you know who's doing the routing. In this case, it's the try is going to route it to the error handler. And now the error handler is going to do some routing, and it's going to check. Can I route it to on-error continue? No, right? I cannot, because it doesn't match anymore. So I'll put a little X here. No, we can't go there. And now where's it going to try to route next?
So it would
It's
go
out.
to default error handler, and from there it would route it to flow to error handling.
Very good. So default error handler here, because we ran out of matches.
Correct. Stop,
right?
propagate.
So stop log propagate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
And
it
now
propagates to error handling, flow to error
it
handling.
propagates the flow 2.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which, and I'm going to put B on there. I mean, no, A on there, right? And now you're right. It will go to the error handler. And we're back to the behavior. I don't have to keep drawing it. That's what happened before, right? And then it propagate all the way out to the client. Let me draw one more just to make the point, out to the default error handler here, out to the default error handler there. Right. So we're back to default error handler because we didn't match. The main thing is we didn't match right here. That was the big difference from the last one. Right. Oh, we didn't match error B, so we fell out the bottom. Good. Okay. So that's continuing and that's propagating. I'm going to add, I have a lot of things I could add in here. Let's go ahead and add a on-error propagate. So I apologize, Diane. Diane is probably not listening right now, but this is not the same thing we had in our class. This is definitely a study group special right here because we're doing a new model. All right. So we're going to go to on-error propagate and we're going to turn off the logging, and that's in flow 2, right? And in here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and make an HTTP request so that we can do something like call a system API, file a trouble ticket, open a case in Salesforce, whatever it is. Sometimes you want to do something in your error handler as a result of the error, right? We're going to go log something in an alert system, send a Twilio text message, whatever, right? Mule's pretty powerful, so we don't need to get into all the connectors. But we're going to, how about we do the Twilio thing? So we're going to make this one host to slash to the system API for Twilio. make that a little post here. There. Good. All right. So we've got the error falling out. Error A is falling out of here. I'm going to put error A on this one. We're going to put on error propagate, and we're going to match. I can probably do it. I can probably let it search. It doesn't find it. I don't know why it doesn't find it, but anyway, I'm going to type it. Study group error A, right? So now we have an on error propagate that does something. It actually sends a post to Twilio. And then what's going to happen in flow 1? Do we reach logger 1 or do we not reach logger? Let me make this bigger. Tell me about the loggers. Logger 1, logger 2, logger 3.
So nothing. So it doesn't go to logger 1. It doesn't log anything. No loggers.
Well, it logs something. But you're right. So let's take what you're saying. I want to make sure that I acknowledge what you got, what I agree with anyway. It never hits logger 1, right? You agree with that? It never hits logger 2. You agree with that? And it never hits logger 3.
That's correct.
Agreed. But it does log something. Why?
Default logger somewhere.
Yeah, the default. Every time we hit that default error handler, which will be here, we're going to hit the default. Right? Here, we're not going to hit the default because we put an on error propagate in there, right? And here we are going to hit the default. So we're going to get 2 logs. Agreed? You make sure you agree with what I'm putting.
Agreed. Yeah.
2 default system logs, no nicely formatted logs that we made, which might not be what we want, right? So maybe what we should do is add more error handlers, but I'm not going to go in a real project. I'd probably go through here, and I care a lot about my logging because, especially in the case of errors, that's what you're going back to look at in production is all of your errors, right? So, good. I'm checking the time. I think we have half an hour. Okay, good. I think we're going to 1:30 Eastern. I'm in Central Time. Okay, and that's good because we got something important to do. Now, I want you to imagine what happens if we have an unexpected error, which is what happens a lot, right? What happens if, let's say, we reached our API limit on Twilio or something? So let's say we have let's call it like HTTP too many requests error here. And used what we just did, this whole study group. There's nothing different. We just need to follow the Mule event. Always, when you're not sure, always follow the Mule event. So we have this new error, which comes out right there. And then what happens?
So an error object is propagated. The error is propagated.
Which one? Too many requests or error
A? Good question. Okay.
Too many requests.
We have 1 vote for too many requests. You got to think. That was Jesus?
Yeah.
You're on record, buddy. This is recorded. Too many requests. Who agrees? Green check for Jesus. Too many requests. Nusha's on board with Jesus. 2 for too many requests. 0 for error A. Anybody for error A? No. Good, because it's not error A. It's too many requests. So, all right. So the propagate only propagates if nothing bad happens inside. If something does happen, bad happens inside, it has to route to our favorite error handler, which is what? I don't know if it's our favorite, but it has to go to the default error handler because an error happened inside. Which that does stop log propagate. So too many requests gets propagated because of this is another time where the default error handler has to be used because you're inside an error scope. So that means out of the, I'm going to jump and skip a few steps now, but out of the flow reference is going to come HTTP too many requests, not error A. So what if you need some information from error A? What if the client is supposed to find out about error A, but we had a problem posting to Twilio? I need to turn that off. We're going to have to do something. We're going to have to design something. We're not going to be able to trust Mule. I guess maybe what I'm trying to get across is, here, I'll write it on the screen. This one does, maybe I'm stumping you. Maybe you don't know what I'm asking. It's fine either way. No information is available now from the original error A. Got it? That's the point. We replaced it with a new error, and the old error is gone. Right? So in Mule, the way we can retain information when it gets replaced, we use the content enricher pattern, right? And we store it where? If I want some information to survive, I need to store it somewhere, right? Where do I store it?
In a variable?
I like it. Yeah. If I need to use it, put it in a variable before calling Twilio, right? Before the new error might happen, you need to save the old information off because Twilio is going to lose it, right? Other option is, or use, no, I don't even know if that would work. I'm not going to put it. You could try using a target variable on Twilio, but that's not this lesson anyway. That's content enricher. So yeah, we're in error handling. So I need to do something to capture that information if I want to use error A. All right, good. I hope you're taking screenshots, Whitney, because I forgot about your screenshot request. Here, I'll grab this one.
Thank you. I'll re-look at the video as well, but I do have David. So if you hear David in the background answering questions,
he can take
sorry.
the screenshot. Yeah. David is our mascot. All right. All right. Let's clear that. Now I'm going to make a little change, and you're going to predict every time I make one of these changes. I want you to think, what does that? What changes? Okay. So I'm going to take this on error propagate out. We're going to put in on error continue. Yeah, for study group error A. And we're going to move Twilio in. Okay. What changed? About logger 1, logger 2, logger 3, and the response to the client, as well as what changed about the logging.
Logger.
I know why you paused. Let me put this all back. And I will erase that for now, because I'm asking what changed, and we can fill it back in.
The on error continue.
Yeah, that's the code that changed. Yeah, what changed for the behavior?
Yeah, that's the code that changed. Yeah.
It changed.
What changed for the behavior?
Yeah, that's the code that changed. Yeah, what changed for the behavior?
So Mule's going to stop, but treat it's going to treat that like a success, right? So when you go in flow 2, you go in the try doesn't have anything. It's going to treat it like a success, and then it's going to bubble back up. And I believe because it was a success, it may. All right, I'm a little lost. I'm not sure if it's going to continue with. I don't think
Always
it'll
follow
continue
the
with
Mule.
flow
So
2, but
I think it goes to
Yeah.
default error handler because too many errors. The twiller has raised an error, I mean, caused an error, and it would go to default error handler that would propagate it. Because
So even though it says, so the proposal is that it goes to default error handler, which does stop log propagate, and we are currently inside an on error continue. So the real question is, what wins, the on error continue or the default error handler?
I guess it's default now. I'm changing my response because it's the same issue.
We have one for propagate. Green check if you say propagate. How many are on the propagate team? Ajit is on the propagate team. Many people aren't committing. That's okay. But I don't know. I think I have one. Anybody want to make an argument for continue? Does anybody think the on-air continue wins? I think your instincts are good. In general, if you're not sure, whatever happens last, I would go for that. So what happens last?
the continue happens last.
No, the propagate, because it kicked out. So yeah, I'm sorry, whatever error occurs last. So on error continue is at the beginning. Do we retain the original error or not? On the way out, it's not acting. So yeah, the propagate wins. The green checks had it. So propagate wins, which means this is exactly the same. Even though I changed it from a propagate to a continue, the default error handler took over. Right? So whatever kind of scope I was in is not relevant to what the end behavior is. So we get HTTP too many requests. Both propagate and continue will do the same thing when the Twilio call fails. Twilio call failing ruins everything. So if you want to change that, you got to put a try or a flow reference or something more complex here to handle error handling for that Twilio call. All right, I have a bunch more things I can do with this example, but we're down to 20 minutes and we want to, this is a study group. This is not a teaching lesson. So I would rather, I can use the example if you want, but I'd rather, you guys may have come with some questions or some fuzzy areas about error handling or something you saw I do that was unexpected. So why don't we turn it around and do some question and answer or discussion or complaints about MuleSoft design or whatever. What have you brought to the study group today?
Global error handler.
Oh yeah, there's no such thing, but I'll show you what there is. They call it that in the Mule class. That's a fundamentals vocabulary. I have beef with the fundamentals vocabulary. It's just called an error handler. You want to do that? Let's do that. There we go. I have to share my screen again. So here's why I don't call it a global error handler.
We should call it custom default error handler.
Well, that's not bad, but yeah, it's just in the code. It's not called. It's just called error handler. It's not called anything with a there's no prefix, right? So let's take this on error continue and let's put it in a error handler, which the MuleSoft class calls it a global error handler. So there's nothing. Nothing wrong with you calling it that, but the actual code doesn't call it that. So we're going to call this error handler 1. And if you go in the XML, you see it's just an error handler. And all that did that's the next place we could take the lesson. But all that did was define one. So it doesn't do anything. It's never used. We just made one, right? Now, when could I use it? Let's go ahead and put this in there just to not have to code something new. I'm going to grab this on error continue, put it in my, oh, I forgot. Anypoint Studio makes it much easier to drag things up than to drag things down. So a little bit of a developer experience hack. If you want to move things around in your canvas and you're having trouble because of scrolling, move them up instead of down, and it works.
I think VS Code will be coming soon, at least the beta version. So
I hope so.
yeah.
There's a panel at Dreamforce about that. I think Jim's going to be on it. Yeah. So, okay. So I just made a global error. I made an error handler that you might, and if you know what, if you take in certification and it says global handler, this is what it means. So it's okay to call it that. I just don't like to because the code doesn't say that. So it's a preference thing. So there's an error handler, never used. Let me show you what, there's a couple ways to use it. One, you can click on the error handler and choose a reference. You see that? Now there's something, I would call it a bug in Anypoint Studio. It's more of an inconvenience. But once I do set a reference error handler for Flow 2, now, first of all, it's going to behave just like it did before, because all I did was make it an error handler and then reference it. But I can define more matches in here. So if I wanted, I could put another on error propagate, and all of my matches here are going to run after the error handler's matches. So it'll chain them together, right? So I'm not going to go through all the errors not with the time we have left. We're not going to, that could be a fun experiment in your own code, right? But we've referenced the error handler. That's one way to use it. And then Anypoint Studio, if you try to clear that out, there's no way to clear it out. I can't click and backspace. So if I want to get rid of a reference error handler, I have to go to the XML and delete it. So Flow 2 has, hey, wait a minute. Why doesn't it save? That's weird. I'm going to show you that. I think I have to save it first. So let's do that. Reference error. I want to show you the both directions. Setting it. So there's error handler 1. There we go. Now we got the reference, right? There it is. Now if you go to configuration XML, you see you have this error handler ref, right? And if we put something in there, go back to the XML. Now we have an error handler ref that has a propagate inside it, right? So if I want to get rid of the ref, I'm going to get rid of the propagate too, but I have to delete the whole error handler, or at least delete the ref attribute. That's the only way I've been able to undo it. I don't think that's a certification thing. I think that's just a practical thing. So there we go. We're not referencing it. The other way you can use it is what? This is probably what you were thinking of. I can go do what? How do I use it as a default? Anybody?
Create config, global config.
Yeah. I can make a global config called configuration. And what do I do in there?
I think we set it as a global error handler.
Default. It's called default. But yeah, I don't know why Anypoint Studio. There it is.
I think default.
I don't know why. Sorry. Let me finish doing what you said. I misclicked. And it's really not being very responsive right now. There we go. I'm just going to type it. You can select it. There we go. Error handler 1. Now, what does that do? There we go. What that does is the same thing as if you went in all the flows and tries and you put a reference there. So that means, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. So if you went to flow 1 and you made a reference to error handler 1, and flow 2 and made a reference to error handler 1, and you went to the try and you made a reference to error handler 1, that would do the same thing as what we just, as the default error handler. It's like setting all the references. I'm being very exact about the way we're looking at that, because what it doesn't do is replace the Mule default error handler, okay?
Okay, that's what I want to know. Yeah.
It does not replace the Mule default error handler. It just sets all your references for you. Because if you don't have a match inside your error handler, it's going to go to the default error handler. If you have an error happen inside an error handler, it's going to go to the Mule default error handler. So I really don't like the name of this configuration here. I don't like that word because it's not true. You know what I mean? It's the default for the flows and tries, and that's all it's the default for. So the times that this one is not used, why don't I write this on the screen here? Not used when 1, error raised inside an error scope, right? That's going to go to the where. When it's not used, we're going to go to the Mule default error handler, which does what?
Stop, log, and propagate.
Log, propagate, yeah. Error raised inside an error scope. And it's also not used when no error scope matched. Right? So if you go into your error handler and you match it and you have one for error B, but error A is what you're working with, error A falls out to the Mule default error handler, stop, log, propagate. Yeah,
So,
and
Ryan,
this is actually, yeah, go ahead.
So what you showed us with the reference inside the error handler, then you added a propagate.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you do the catches on the errors that are defined first, and then it goes to the referenced error handler afterwards?
Let me, I don't want to answer I want to make sure I understand the question. So let's go. So I'm going to leave the default error handler, or your question doesn't matter about default error handler?
Well, I suppose default error handler is sort of dovetailing from that, because it's like layering your error handling. So errors are handled in the errors are handled in a try scope first. Errors are handled in an error handling block within a flow.
Yeah.
But if the error handling block has a reference to another error handling block, is it the catches in the flow error handling block that are done before the referenced error handling block?
The sequence. Yeah, good. Okay, I'm going to draw what you said. I think I like it. I think I get the question, and I'm going to draw it so that you can catch me if I don't get the question, but I think I got it. There's a sequence of which ones are hit, right? So this error handling block has a reference to error handler 1 that I did on purpose. I hard coded it. If we use the default error handler, like you said, it dovetails. It's the same thing as this, right? So that means the error handling block is going to be first. It's going to try to match these. And if it runs out and it doesn't find any, then it's going to try to match these, right? And if it runs out and doesn't find any, what happens?
So the reference ones are handled first.
Yes. I think that if somebody's done an experiment and they don't agree, I haven't proven that to myself recently. So we could run an example program, but I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I was suspecting it'd be the other way around, because normally when they teach error handler, they say if something's not matched within the error handler, or if an error handling block doesn't exist in a flow, then it goes.
Okay, so the sequence, that's a good one. So what I want to do, that's very good. What we need to, how do we check it? Because it only matters. Aha, I know how we would check it. Let's make an experiment. That's where we have just enough time to run an experiment, because when I don't know, I want to see for sure. So I'm actually going to leave the reference here, and because I want to really control this, I'm going to take out the default error handler. I don't want a default error handler. I want to use a reference error handler, so just the try scope is relevant. Okay. In fact, I can delete the whole configuration. I don't even need that whole global element. And for this example, I should remove the post so that it will actually run. All I need in there is a logger4. We're going to determine error handler sequence, and that's good because I'm actually not sure. Francis's instincts may be correct. Logger4. All right. And then I suppose I could put logger5 here. And what I can do is make them both match error A, and then we're going to know which one ran first. And actually, to make that even more clear, what I should do is actually put logger5 in the message. Logger5 means that the local ones run first. Let me do this. I'm going to turn back on log exception also. So we're going to get the Mule default logging, and we're going to get our logger5. And on the same, on the error handler 1, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to put log exception. And logger4 will have a message logger4, and I think I can run it. I love to see it, to see what really happens. Let's see, checking for errors. I have a post. I think this will run as is. And then what's cool is I could put it on GitHub and share this with you guys after the meet. And since it's runnable, I don't like to share incomplete stuff, but we could actually run this thing. I don't think I have a good, here. We'll use advanced REST client. We'll use the MuleSoft one. I've been trying 3. One of my colleagues, Rook, told me about insomnia. I've been using Postman since I was in diapers, not really, but a long time. And I use advanced REST client and Glass. I have 3 different REST clients, plus the command line one. It didn't seem like it launched. Where'd it go? It is time for a new laptop, that's for sure. It's slow. Well, if it doesn't launch, I'll just use Postman. Oh, there was an error on the build. Let's see what that was. A reference error handler cannot have on errors. Oh, okay. So we don't have, look at that. It didn't give us a compile time error or a design time error. But apparently, this is what I used to believe in Mule 4.2. Okay, the editor will let you do it, but Mule runtime will not let you start the application. That's not what either one of us predicted.
Yeah.
All right, good. So we can't put one here. If we use a reference, then we're not allowed to put anything inside.
It's either or. Yeah.
It's either or. Yeah. It's really, that's fine. Yeah. So I think we've resolved. We've got the both Francis and I predicted wrong, and this is actually clean. MuleSoft said reference or here, but not both. It's pretty good though that MuleSoft made it so that these error handlers are not used if something happens inside the error handler, right? Otherwise, you could have an infinite loop, right? You don't want it to go here if it has an error inside, right? If I put a raise error inside this, let's make it even worse. We'll do an on error continue. If MuleSoft didn't save us from ourselves by having those, because it's kind of a weird rule, right? It doesn't use this as the default for the whole application. But if MuleSoft didn't do that, then we would have an infinite loop right now, right? So this is my final error, right? Study group. And looking at the time, it probably is our final error because we need to wrap up. So we're going to do study group final error. Right? So I'm going to put a little note on here. What MuleSoft did for us by having it have the exception to the rule is we don't, the application default error handler will not be used at this point. Right? So Mule default error handler used here, right? And we like that. This prevents an infinite loop. Make sense? So I think we're kind of out of time to do new things, but but anyway, Whitney, what do we have to do before we wrap this up? I don't know if I need to save you some time, or we can chat, or we can take everybody off of. You know, we could start. I'd love to do. I do this in meetups. I'd love to have a group picture if you guys want to, because I mean these study groups are working out. People like them, so I like to.
Yeah,
like
can
to
you
start
take the picture?
them.
Can
I'm
you take the
happy to.
picture? And I do have some wrap up slides, but yeah, if you could take the picture.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to give you guys about 3 minutes because some of you want to go put on a hat or take off a hat or put on a blur background or whatever you want to do. 3 minutes. Whitney's going to do the wrap up slides, and I'm going to ask you whoever's willing to get on the camera, and we'll do a group picture. So go ahead, do the slides, Whitney, while people get themselves ready.
All right. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Sorry, guys.
Praveen had a question while she's getting that ready. Can we get the recording of the batch processing session? I have two ways I can't say yes. Okay, so one of them is cleared. We did retain the recording. Diane Kessler, who is not, she's joined, but she's not here because she's in class. She has to say yes, so we'll have to ask her.
Oh, no, actually, I don't know if we have the recording because I know we have the last one.
All right, Sajid, see you, man.
Okay,
so
so
you want to do the slides, or?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Go for it.
All right. Okay, so thank you guys for all coming, but we really want to get the word out. So I want you to invite your Muley friends and colleagues. Let them know, about our study group. And also, we will be at Dreamforce. So if you see us, please stop by and let's have a conversation. And finally, again, thank you very much for everything. And we are welcoming testimonials, which I had that in the slide. Here we go. We are welcoming testimonials because we want people to hear about these groups, and we want people to be able to experience our other offerings. So I have highlighted Francis and Shayna, and Shayna, who have given us testimonials, and we would love to hear from you as well. So again, thank you. And that's it.